Welcome in, everybody. Today, I am here with Tim Holley, broker owner, Long River Realty, and I am Jared Rail, realtor and appraiser. And we are here with Michael Johnson from Amerispec. This is our fourth episode relating to home inspections. And today, our main focus is structural stuff to do with the home that
Go
Mike's
ahead, say engineering. I dare you.
I thought you were going to say it too. Oh, man. Yep.
Somebody said something about engineering earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep. Get those school book back out.
that's it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it. The episodes have been great. It's crazy to think we're already on the fourth.
Yeah,
Went by fast.
yep. A lot
Been
of
a lot
fun.
of
You'll
fun,
you'll
yes.
be you'll be back. You don't worry about it. You can't get it. You can run, but you can't.
Yeah,
hide.
you better not hit it and quit it with me, all right? I better be a reoccurring, all right?
That's it. That's it.
Yeah, good. It's good stuff today for sure. Structural integrity. It's good stuff. Do you guys have any specific questions, or do you want me just to lead into a couple things?
Well, I would just say, where do you start with structural? What's the first thing you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty much doing it the whole inspection. You know, it's kind of a hard question to answer fully. You know, as soon as we pull up, I am looking at the scope of the house. You know, I'm looking at the roof lines, I'm looking at the wall lines, even the fascia and soffit lines as well. Sometimes you can tell if things are out of plumb, and if they are, you can kind of tell where to look. And what I'm talking about is sometimes I've been on roofs and primarily tile because there's a lot of weight on tile. You can see shifts of where you have dipped points, you know, points of movement on a roof. When I see that as a home inspector, I now know when I get in the attic, I need to get myself to that specific spot to see if we have any movement, any shifting, any damaged trusses. A lot of structural integrity comes from your truss system in your attic. It's allowing that load to be pushed off and down, and to take the load of that roof. I mean, tiles are, oh man, they're heavy. You know, I used to do roofing with my father in North Carolina, and I was the grunt kid. I had to take all the shingle packs up to the roof. This is before they had the little dollies that would roll them up for you. And just thinking about doing that with tile it's unreal. So a lot of weight put on those roofs. A lot of stuff can happen in the attic. That's a huge area for us to really slow down and look at. Manufactured homes going in the crawl space, looking to see what kind of moving and shifting we have down there. Those are areas of huge concern when we're looking for structural components.
You know, it's interesting you brought up the manufactured home thing because I saw that on a home not long ago where on one side of the home the skirting is kind of slanted a little bit.
Right.
And then on the other side of the home, the skirting is kind of it's I can't do it in my screen here, but it's curved a little bit. You know, that's an indication that something's been moving.
Something's moving.
But it's not an end all be all either, right?
No,
The
not at all.
manufactured homes can be re-leveled, and you know, you probably, I mean, at that point, the skirting's probably going to have to be replaced in that scenario.
Sure.
And they recommend those being re-leveled every 10 years minimum.
That's good to know. See, I didn't know that. That's good to know. I thought it was longer. So that is good to know.
It's a 10-year period. You know, I've never had anybody call out and not loan on one. But when you talk to a lot of people that do the work, they say because in a 10-year, and that doesn't mean you have to do a lot of work. You can get in underneath there and just make a few cranks.
Shim it up, yeah.
Shim it up. But yeah, they say every 10 years at least it should be re-inspected for those issues.
And Jared, you are right. Manufactured homes aren't as pressing, but your stick builts, if you're having movement like that, where you know, what's funny is I'll tell you a quick story if that's all right. I was doing a home in the foothills, and the buyer was he was a GC, and he fought me tooth and nail for 2 weeks to get this inspection on a brand new home. He was like, "You're not going to find anything." He's like, "I don't understand why I'm going to pay you money to do this." I'm like, "Just let me do it." You know, gave him a discount. Let me do it. Let me just show you. Hang with me. Let me just show you what I do. He walked with me the whole time. He's like, "You're not going to find anything." I was here every day. I get to the attic inspection. I get to the garage attic. get up there. It's where they have the furnace. What they did after they built the home, the HVAC tech guys went up there and took out 4 trusses out of the attic, 4 complete trusses, and put this air handler in. Excuse me, air handler. So I came down and told this guy, and something of that magnitude over time can absolutely cause structural deficiencies in that area, 1000%. And it's just crazy to think that in a home in the foothills, brand new home, that goes on. So when you're talking about having an inspection for integrity like that, it's super beneficial because nobody goes in the attic. Nobody goes up there. And that's the area where you have a lot of movement. And if you do, you want to see that. If you have a cracked cord on your W cord, it's imperative to have that fixed because you lose strength in that area. Whether it's minimal or it's a lot, that one will allow another to crack and then another. So.
And the HVAC guys moving those trusses wasn't necessarily the issue, right? It's the fact that they moved them and then they didn't put them back.
They completely altered them. They sawzalled them right off. I got up there and I was like, there's nothing here. And the thing was sitting, it was hanging. They hung it off of, they took 4 out and they hung it off these other 2. So it was coming down like this and hanging. It was the weirdest positioning I've ever seen. The guy was furious.
I wonder how it got past inspection with the city.
That's what I thought. That's what I was thinking.
So weird.
Well, they do say the city comes out and they do their framing inspection and it passed framing.
And then they did it?
And then they come in and they put in they cover it all up. They weight down the roof and everything.
Yeah.
At some point after all of that was done, when the city's inspector is not going to crawl back up in the attic and check it again. He already checked the framing.
Yeah. The way down on the roof is the tiles that sit up there. When you see tiles sit up on a roof for a long period of time, those tiles it's not just that the roofers are lazy. Those tiles are settling the trusses down is what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That's a required step in the process, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But those are big areas. The attic is a huge area for us, and it gets harder during the summer because it gets so hot up there. But it really is an area of huge concern because nobody goes up there, and it's an area that needs to be monitored. Even if you're looking up there, just poking your head up and looking around, shining a flashlight around and making sure that your sheathing, which is the board that sits on top of your trusses. So your roofing material, your sheathing, and then your trusses are underneath, right? Sometimes they'll have tech shield under there, which will help with the efficiency of heat transfer through the attic. But a lot of that stuff, if it's not implemented, it will be a domino effect to other areas.
Yeah. You said when you first started off, the first thing you do as you're pulling up to the house, you're already looking. Mm-hmm. And just as an example, in the HUD handbook or the FHA handbook, appraisers are asked to observe, analyze, and report. Right, we're observing. Mm-hmm. Agents should be observing too. When you come up to a house, you should be looking around, pointing things out to your client that you might see that you need to look at. But you're observing and you're looking for little clues that tell you to look a little further.
Absolutely, it's a tale of what the house has been doing, what it's going through, and we don't bring our crystal balls to these inspections. We don't know the future, but we're trying to eliminate things in the future with what we're seeing in the present. And not always does it work, but we've honed our specific skills in pretty darn well. So we know this area very well. We know how things condition over time, and we know how to help that not become such a deteriorated process because the sun is such a destructive force out here. The water mixing with that, you start having leaks in roofs, so you can get down to your trusses, which also, again, will cause structural integrity loss. So it's a multitude of things, but the attic is definitely an area where I like to start the bulk of it. Yeah.
Yeah, so like an FHA appraiser has to take a peek in the attic at a minimum. Depending on the style of attic and things, we're doing just a head and shoulders into the scuttle here in our area because there's not full access attics generally. But if I'm walking through the house and I see some staining on the roof, or I mean, not on the roof, but on the ceiling,
Mm-hmm.
and this is something that homeowners don't think about. The roof starts leaking, and they have the roof fixed. And then you and I come along as an appraiser or as a home inspector, and we see stains.
I love
Well,
this. I
now
know where
there's
you're
still
going.
an unanswered question there.
Absolutely.
We don't know if that's from an old leak or a current leak.
It's
And
so good to say.
so if you are gonna when you make the repair to the roof, don't forget you got to fix the inside so that there's not evidence of roof leaks, because then it just raises a big question mark. The question
It's a
mark is so.
very good point, Jared. Seriously, that is a very good point because we have no idea. And I don't want that client calling me back saying, "How the heck did you miss this big dry stain on the ceiling?" And then I have to say, "Well, nothing was on the roof, nothing was in the attic. It's just it's dry stained, and that's never good enough. Yeah, I mean, and you know that for a fact. No one really ever takes that answer and says, "Oh, great, okay, well, let me go on about my day then." So it is that's a very good point.
Yeah, I mean, if you see the staining up there, and my first thing that I'm going to do is when I see a spot on a ceiling. Now I'm going to when I go to do my head and shoulders in the attic, I'm going to look
Yep.
up there and
Yep.
see if I see a corresponding stain on the wood in the
Mm-hmm.
underside of the wood in the attic, and I'm looking again at the roof, making sure the roof doesn't look funny. But
Yep.
the staining alone, the roof could look great, and it may have already been replaced, but the staining alone makes me go, okay, there's evidence of uh, leaks. This may be from a previous leak, and I've seen this in a home inspection before too. This may be from a previous leak, but how
Mm-hmm.
do we know?
Yeah.
We don't know,
Absolutely.
so we still got to point it out, and it
Absolutely.
still may turn into a condition that needs to be investigated further, whether it's a roof inspection
Yep.
or whatever, because now we're getting beyond our scope. If there's no evidence of the roof itself is failing,
Yep.
but there's water stains,
Mm-hmm.
that could be old or it could be current, and we
Mm-hmm.
need to have somebody else look at it.
Yeah, I always like to make sure what's going on. Like you said, if you see something on your walkthrough inside, we go to that area in the attic. If for any reason we can't make it to that area, which I'm because I'm my size, I can get there, but like my other inspector Matt, he might not be able to. But what we do is we tell them, hey, you got to stay in here. We're calling it out. We can't see what's going on in the attic. We don't know all the extent, but we need to get this looked at. We need to get it at least somewhat painted. At the very least, so we know
or
that it's not an ongoing problem.
something needs to go back to the seller is, you might need to update your seller's property disclosure
Or that.
statement.
Mm-hmm.
So that way, because this is going to come up,
That is good
so
too.
you should have it in there to say, previous stains been repaired, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
So that way it matches what gets called out. And that's good for the buyer to have that, because now the seller's giving the buyer the comfort, or at least letting them know if has something been repaired, or was it just painted over to try to cover
Mm-hmm.
up or non-repair.
That's a really good point. I didn't even think about that as well, because that is your seller's Bible, if I'm not
Yep.
mistaken, to the
Yep.
house and everything in it. So, do you find those to be pretty accurate?
I hope they all are. I don't want to
Yeah.
call anybody out. I think when they're not accurate is because it's something that the seller may not have known.
Yeah.
That especially if they're into the second or third owner,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it happened two owners ahead of them and they
Mm-hmm.
never asked that question
Yeah.
because they maybe didn't do an inspection. They paid for cash. There was no lending involved. They wanted to have the house. So I know that I've seen them in there, and once you go investigate it, oh yeah, that happened to the prior people. Here's the receipts where it was fixed.
Yeah.
It didn't bother me, so I never painted over the spot.
The ones I've seen have rang pretty true, honestly. And I've had a lot of people say, "Well, how do you know?" You don't know, but you see it, what's on the document, and then we go look. And 9 times out of 10, it's documented what happened, and it's documented for the repair. So I didn't know. A lot of times people think that they're not true and not right on, but I always find them to be pretty true.
Arizona's a disclosure state.
Mm-hmm.
If those sellers are not disclosing what they know, it could cost them a lot of money in the
Sure.
end.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Very good point. Yep.
That's right to rescind, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
If they didn't disclose something that they knew and should have known,
Mm-hmm.
that's grounds for rescinding the contract. So,
Yep.
and Mike and Tim, you guys both brought up really good points there. Going back to what I was talking about with the staining, you know, I if I'm the agent or I get the home inspection and it says that there's stains, which shows evidence of a previous leak, and you say, you might want to have that further evaluated. Well, if I pull out the seller property disclosure document and it says the roof leaked 2 years ago, there was an
Mm-hmm.
insurance claim, the insurance claim matches, shows the repair from 2 years ago or the replacement from 2 years ago, you know, now you have everything is
A
lining up.
paper trail. You got a
Yeah,
paper trail
it's done and
showing where
dusted.
it's at.
It look, it's that I love it. Yeah,
You would
absolutely.
just love that a lot of sellers would, once the repair is made, fix the evidence so that you as a home inspector and me as an appraiser aren't having to call that stuff out. But
Yeah, it makes it tough. I want to be accurate on everything, but there is a huge gray area with some stuff where we just don't know, and God forbid we have it in there to have it looked at. Well, then the other side's like, well, my gosh, how nitpicky are you being right now? And it's like, well, I'm sorry, I'm doing this inspection for my buyer, and if it were me, and that's how I've always done my inspections and put my own 3 kids and my wife there, if I was having it inspected, I would want that to be called out. God forbid it was bad or not bad, because then that gives me an opportunity to try and do something with it. If it's not
that's
called out and said anything about, you can't do anything with it.
That's exactly it. It's so that you can make an informed decision. You can investigate further. It doesn't
Right.
mean that repair is going to be required. It doesn't
Right. Right.
mean that we should walk away from the house. What it means is, hey, go take another look.
Yeah.
Go,
Absolutely.
go
Just triple
form an
checking.
opinion. Hey, you might want to look.
Mm-hmm.
And you might look and go, no problem. It doesn't bother me. Or
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Or you might look, you got some water up there, maybe maybe the insulation is depressed and wet, and
it
it's
could
a
be
lot
an
of
issue,
stuff.
it could be a non-issue, and that's what we're trying to,
Yeah.
you're pointing it out so we can just make sure that it is or it isn't.
Right. Right.
um, you know another thing that I see that causes me to observe further or look further,
Mm-hmm.
and you probably would say the same thing. So if I see small cracks in stucco, which in and itself is not an issue, stucco cracks.
Right.
But now, what are you looking for if you see small cracks in the stucco?
Sure. I'm looking for a lot of settlement, a lot of differential settling, a lot of movement, and not only in that area, but surrounding areas. Um, a lot of times when people uh, start talking about the cracks and stucco and walls and things like that, I like to tell them, you put this wall up and we put windows and doors in a solid wall, you do lose a little bit of integrity in that area. So you start to have hairline fractures off of the corners and things like that, common. But like you said, if we start getting to a point where we can stick a knife blade in there or, um,
Register of contractors call a quarter.
there we go. I was going to say a
So
quarter.
it's a quarter. So if you can put a
So
quarter in there, you need to
mhm,
start looking closely
100%. And
until
that's
it gets to
exactly
that
where it
point.
gets bad. You're absolutely right, Tim. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of that on houses. I see a lot of it on fencing, stucco CMU block fencing where I can fit my hand through. But we have a lot of settlement out here. A lot of houses are perched up on hills. Not all the time they compact the soil and sand and pea gravel down the way it should. So you do have a lot of settlement with homes, and that's a huge thing to look for. Exterior cracks and interior tape seam cracks as well, but ones that are wide, not ones that are hairline fractured.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was getting at. And one
Mm-hmm.
thing that I'm usually one of the tells that it could be something serious, like you said, in surrounding areas. But say I've got a crack in the ceiling,
Mm-hmm.
and it comes across the ceiling, and it's just a hairline crack, but then it
Mm-hmm.
comes all the way down the wall, and then it's in the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
or the stucco cracks, and if
Mm-hmm.
it goes just in the stucco right under the corner of the window, that's one thing. But if it
Right.
goes all the way down and then it continues into the foundation,
Right.
it's probably the crack in the foundation that's causing the stucco crack, not
Absolutely.
the other way around, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that it's like I said, it's clues. We're looking for clues
Yeah.
to look further, and
Yeah.
the crack in itself may not be an issue,
It
but let's
was
just
it
make sure there's not something else.
it was difficult to learn when I came out here, because where I'm from, we don't have a lot of this. We don't have a lot of cracking. We don't have a lot of stucco. Our concrete doesn't do what it does here. It gets pushed up because of tree roots. We don't have a lot of cracking. So when I came out here, it was a huge learning curve to understand the conditions of our environment and the what we have, sand, rock. It's hard stuff. It needs to be done right and compacted right to make sure that the house is not going to settle and sink too much. But it was a huge learning curve out here. I used to think that a hairline fracture in a wall, run the other way. And it's not that case. I don't think I've inspected a home out here in Havasu that hasn't had a dozen cracks on the outside exterior wall. I mean,
Yeah.
even the $2-3 million homes in refuge, like it's just what it is.
You got to remember, we go from extreme weather here. It can get as low as 20 degrees at night.
Yeah.
And then in the summertime, they say it's only 120, but who knows what it really, but 100-degree difference, that stucco's working.
Yeah.
It's
It's
breathing
unreal.
in
And
that house.
it's right. It does. Yeah.
And the outside temperature is 120. Put your hand on the wall.
Right.
That's 120.
Right.
I'm not ready for
And
it.
some of those are not. They're or get in your car. It's not 120 when you get in the car.
Grab your ladder when it's sitting on, outside. You're on the roof. You grab your ladder to get down. I've never gotten off a ladder so fast before until the first summer I left that ladder out in the sun while I'm on there, and I had to come down. It gets so hot, so hot. But yeah, structural integrity is absolutely. It is key to make sure that your house is going to last. All these other things we've talked about, plumbing, electrical, I forget what the first was. It the roof, the first one? I'm talking about roofs.
We had
I
roofs.
think it was just general.
It was general stuff.
Learning
Okay.
of why to get a home inspection and things like that.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. But like the other stuff, you can work around that, and of course you can work around structural deficiency loss, but it's huge. Once you have it, if it's not taken care of and dealt the right way, corrected the right way, it will continue and it will ensue in other areas. And I haven't seen a house yet where it's been to the point where I've been scared for them. I've seen walls, retaining walls, and CMU block walls in that sense, but houses out here, it never really gets to a point where I'm saying, "Oh, you got structural integrity loss here." I think one time we had a structural engineer called in from Phoenix to look at one for Carolyn Altman, and nothing came of it. But it is absolutely imperative to look for. Yeah.
I had one situation where on a home that not as an appraiser, as an agent, that had a crack in the foundation, and we had to call in a foundation repair expert and get bids. And they, I mean, we didn't. I can find one here, like you said. Carolyn had to bring somebody in out of Phoenix. I found some places in Las Vegas, which is actually even closer.
Right.
But you got to go to the big city.
You do.
To find these companies. Evidently, there's enough of these issues out there that these companies exist, though.
Right.
And they have stuff they can inject. They'll dig down and inject stuff under the home to bring it back up and level it out. And pretty interesting. But we do these inspections for a reason, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's not because it's never an issue.
Right. You want to stay on top of it. You want to get in front of it. You don't want to be behind on repairs and major repairs. If we're talking about structural repairs, let's just be honest, they're major repairs if they're structural. And being on the bad side of a structural repair is not fun. But it's necessary, because if you want the house, you want it to be safe, it's got to be structurally engineered to be that way.
And that's where people, they need to, as they walk, they need to look. It would be like if you're not having the house looked at, worked on, fixed on, when you see these problems, it would be like buying a car brand new off the lot and driving it for 10 years and never changing the oil.
Absolutely.
It's not going to happen. There's
Absolutely.
Natural wear and tear. And if you see something, and the homeowner should be the first one to notice it, if you see something starting, preventative maintenance, call somebody, get them out there, get them to take a look at it. Because there's an old commercial back from when I was young. It's like, you can pay me now or you can pay me later, and if you see it happening, you might as well call somebody out and at least know what's going on. So if someone says, hey, why is that doing that?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I had someone out here to check it, and this is what they told me.
And I tell a lot of clients, or not a lot, I tell all my clients that deferred maintenance is the top killer of a home, in my opinion. Um, if you have, like you were just saying, you have a brand new home, you're living in it for 5 years. If you're not doing things to keep your house up, keep the systems running, I guarantee you're going to have something major coming up at some point. It's so imperative to make sure that your systems and house are maintained to the fullest, just to make sure that everything is to peak performance. And HVAC systems, taking it apart and having it looked at by HVAC tech before the summer hits, that's huge. I've even had my toilets and sinks checked out. Our guy that we bought the house from is a plumber, so I had him come back over and check all the things before we got into the hot months. Just little things like that will ensure that your house and your systems will continue to run and last the way that they were intended to.
Hey, Mike, you brought something up in a previous episode in the plumbing episode regarding plumbing supports, and we're talking, now about structure and going in the attics and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly are you looking for with plumbing support?
Sure.
And what's the importance of that?
Sure. So a lot of times what we're seeing is we are required to have eyes on these. It is a state standard. What they typically do is they like to fashion your supply lines on your W truss cords in the attic. But doing that, they want to make sure that they have a proper support. I believe it's every 2 trusses. If not, it's every truss. I've seen it done either way. But it is a plastic cupping unit that gets nailed to the truss, and then your PEX or copper line sits right inside of it, and it runs all the way across your truss system, and it allows it to have the proper run. It doesn't allow a lot of movement. It just keeps everything all in one place and intact, if that makes sense. Yeah, but the condition of that we have to look at. It's imperative.
So the supports themselves, you're saying, are like a loop or some kind of a clamp.
It's exactly
through the trusses.
That's right.
Are you seeing more issues with that on homes that have been replumbed?
That's a good question.
An old copper house has been replumbed, and now they've got PEX running through the attic, and I think they just go up there and they start throwing the lines.
They start pulling and put, a lot of times, and I don't know if they take out and put new in. And to be honest with you, typically it's all the same. It's that plastic clasp that gets adhered to the truss. I don't really know if I have anything different from copper to PEX. It's pretty much all the same, but it's got to be there. I had houses that it doesn't, and when it's not, it lays right on the ceiling, underneath all of the insulation. So first off, we can't usually see it. Secondly, the more movement you get to those areas, and especially with PEX, or polybutylene, the connection issues with poly, if it's moving and not put into a proper clasp, will allow breakage on the connection points, which will allow water to ensue inside the home. So again, those are areas where, if you don't have them set in place, we are calling that out to make sure that they are put in place.
All right, last thing I've got, and I don't know if you have anything else, Tim, but something that I've seen in a few different situations that's interesting is, when I'm showing a buyer a house, we got a list of 5 properties, 10 properties, and you just running through the houses, right? And then you find the one you like, and you go and you make an offer.
Right.
You get the home inspection, and post home inspection, I know you like to do this, and a lot of people do. You do a walkthrough with the homeowner right at the end of the inspection.
Mm-hmm.
Now, me personally, I want to go back again. The post home inspection, we don't have the report in front of us. You're telling us kind of the hot points,
right?
You just saw,
right?
Then fast forward a day, and I've got the home inspection, and I've read it. Now I want to go back. with my buyer, and I want to look at this stuff. And I get questions from agents sometimes like, well, what's on there that you're concerned with that you want to go look? Well, I just want to go over the whole thing.
Sure.
I want to go put eyes on everything and just do a walkthrough. This is the house we're buying. We're not doing the quick walkthrough, the quick showing.
Everything has importance to a
have
degree.
Information.
Right.
Let's go compare it to what we see in person, and then we can decide what might be bins or repairs or what might need further evaluation or whatever. But I mean, I think the homeowner walkthrough with you as the home inspector is great right after.
Yes,
Sometimes
absolutely.
it clarifies a lot of the big concerns.
Absolutely.
But I do find there's always a few other things on the report that we want to go back and look at. And so, just
and it's
on that, or thoughts as well from you, Tim, on that, and going back and actually spending some time once we have all the information.
Yeah, and that's what that inspection period is for. You don't think, don't end your inspection period the day after you read the home inspection if you still have another 6 days to go.
Yeah, take your time. It's not a race.
It's
not a race.
I know, Mike, if people call and ask a question, hey, there was something that you sent over to me here, I know he takes the time to answer the questions. So
absolutely,
there might be questions in that home, because it's like anything else. You have any questions? No, you will in a day or so.
I was going to say, you will. Yeah.
You will.
You will.
Call me back. So that's why it's good to do that re-walk through. And Mike, I don't think, in stop me if I'm wrong, but if somebody called you back 2 days later and said, we read this and we saw this, could you clarify this?
Sure.
Or at that point, you might even direct them and say, you probably, and this is why it's important to do it sooner than later, maybe I would call such and such to take a closer look evaluation for you.
Yep. I wanted to make a joke there and say, no, I'm not going to help them. But yes, absolutely, I'd answer. And I love to have people there now. And it's tough when people are there from the beginning, especially with some that want to be involved in the entire process. And I get that. But when we go, we like to have our time. We like to look at everything. But it's such a benefit for the client to be there at the end to go over the general summary with me, because not only do we look at it in person, I give them more insight on it that's just not in the report. Just things like, in my opinion, if this were my home, this is how I would fix it. This is who I would use. I don't put that into my report. We're not required to do that by state, but being in person, we get a little more of that. I don't even know what to say. That intimate, reaction or interaction there, just getting everything kind of on the same page and kind of knowing where they're going to go from here. And we also put in severity what we would do. I would say, well, if this was my home, I might look at the roof. I might look at the electrical. I might get some of the leaks fixed. But, probably everything else, I might just get a nice handyman in town, see if I can kind of go that route, So having people there is amazing. A lot of times people can't be there because they're out of state, which we completely understand. But that's where it comes into play, where if they need to call me, give me a shout.
Well, and even having, have your agent do the post inspection walkthrough with the inspector, so that there's not those questions. You want to have somebody there, but and even if nobody can be there, again, take that report, take it back with you to the house and look at stuff. And if you have questions, then you need to call the inspector and get it clarified. Right.
And I've also called clients while on site before I left to go over everything. I would FaceTime them on my phone or the agent's phone, and we will go around and do that. We're flexible. We want you to see what it is, and we want you to know and be clear on it. So when you're writing your repair request form, there's no ifs, ands, or buts on anything. We know what we're wanting to achieve here. So it's, just call if they have questions. That's my one thing. I don't want you guys to answer my stuff. I want them to call me so we can go over it together.
Yeah. Right. I'm smiling because you're talking about one of our previous episodes we did. The way technology has gotten. You just can pick up the phone and FaceTime them.
Yep.
Just flip the camera around and show them what you're looking at. It's almost as good as them being there. If they're out of state and they can't be there, that doesn't replace being on site. However, you're their eyes on site. And if you're standing there and able to answer any questions they have while they're standing there, that's so much more than reading a report.
Yep. It makes me feel old with the technology. My first phone was
Yeah.
a Sprint flip phone, and I had to pay like $30 for a ringtone on it.
Don't even give me that. I had a bag phone was my first phone,
Oh
so I
man,
was
yeah.
working the
Yeah,
bag.
I'm somewhere in between there, guys.
Okay, all right.
You know, flip phone is more modern than me, Mike.
Yeah.
All right. Next episode, I want us sitting all around with each other and
All
having
right.
fun. All right. Yeah, that's
All
what we want
right.
on the next one.
So I think that's pretty much getting us wrapped up what we're looking at today. Any final thoughts that you have for us, Mike, on it, or how do they
No,
get a hold of you, where you're at,
I
and
think
so
if you're
forth?
in doubt, get the inspection. You know, if it's something that you're going back and forth with, I always say err on the side of caution, because I bet you'll be surprised with what you find. And if you ever need to have questions on what we do, what we don't do, extracurricular activities that we also offer as well, you can always reach me at 910-398-3661. And my business line is 928-854-2595. And we are open 24/7, 365.
All
As
right.
long, as long as you can remember Michael Johnson at Amerispec, Google is a great tool. You'll
I tell
find
you,
the
I'm
Yep.
here. You
You'll
can't
find
miss
it.
me.
no
Yeah.
big
You'll find
deal.
us all.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everybody for joining in. Hit the like, the share, the follow. I think it is when you hit the like, the subscribe, it allows you to go down. Hit that subscribe all.
Oh,
You'll get
yeah.
the little notifications in your bells, and that way,
That's what
if
I
you
did.
miss one, you can go back and catch the
Yep.
other ones, and they're there. And also, if you want a great, we don't do the bloopers yet. We will. But if you even go into the shorts, you click on the shorts and you look at our faces. I just go into the shorts just to look at us because the camera catches you at a moment and you're like, what the heck was I thinking when the camera caught my face on that one?
I
I
know.
got to play it just to see what the heck I was talking about.
I know.
But go in and look at the shorts. That'll give you a good laugh just looking at the pictures on the shorts. But
That is funny to do, Tim. I did that as well.
so, but everybody,
Yeah.
thank you. And you got a little sweetheart behind you there, Michael, that's
Hi.
probably ready for Dad's attention the rest of the day. So we'll talk to you all soon. Have a
All right,
great
guys.
day.
Have a good
Thank
one.
you. Bye.
Thanks.